Let's start seated. Ah, nice to see you guys. Just a nice tall seat. Heck yeah. Just experience the kind of energetic dichotomy of the breath. So the reception of the energy on the inhale and feel that filling you. And on the exhale, feel that dissipation of energy as the body relaxes throughout the entire duration of the exhale. So really feeling into the power of the inhale breath. And then that smooth, gentle release on the exhale side. And let's give ourselves about 60 more seconds just to feel into the two sides of the breath. Last 15 seconds here. Let's exhale out. We'll allow the eyes to open if they're closed. And we'll lift the chin towards the ceiling here. As the chin lifts, think about rolling the shoulders both back and down so the collarbone gets broad. And then really push the chin up so you feel this anterior throat expansion. And then start to just let the bottom jaw kind of explore that lateral movement. And there'll likely be, I'm going to stop just so that I can speak. There'll likely be some points where you're moving here where you really feel the intensity of the shortness of this anterior throat tissue. Hang out in those spots. Let's create some room around the throat. Eventually, we'll come back to neutral. Let the head settle at neutral. And let's squeeze those shoulder blades back once again so that we feel that retraction and extend the arms straight out in front of us. So shoulders pulling back and arms extended. We can get that to, there we go. And then tuck your chin. And as the chin tucks, there's a little bit more shoulder space. Find that. And then let your hands come down. And then let's just let the head tilt back, back and forth. So I don't know how the chin stays relatively tucked, relatively connected and centered and anchored in the sternum. And the head I think tilts is the best way to describe this as it moves back and forth. And again, now we're getting kind of from this anterior throat, just wrapping around into that lateral neck space. And then eventually head comes back to neutral. We'll lift and find full settle, and let's transition to hands and knees tabletop. And as you come to hands and knees tabletop, play those fingers out nice and wide, really connect the handprints here, and curl your toes. We'll lift our seat and we'll roll our way back into down dog. And as you get back into that down dog space, push the top of your head away from your tailbone. The tailbone has this anchoring spot, and we're elongating the top of the head. The weight wants to shift forward as you do that. So maybe even bend the knees a little bit more than normal, and then really think about that head space or that neck length. We're trying to get underneath the scapula here. And then we'll come down to hands and knees tabletop, and we'll sink back into child's pose. And then as you come and you settle here in child's pose, that lower shelf underneath the scapula, we want to feel that with our respiration. So inhale, energetically speaking, kind of the middle of the back. And then exhale, don't let the sternum collapse forward. So as you're here, think about broadening without losing the sternum position. So as you relax in, probably feeling the tailbone relax into further depth is the best way to ensure that you're not collapsing into that anterior space. And let's just give ourselves 15 more seconds here. And when you're ready, we're going to pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. From hands and knees tabletop, let's curl the toes once again. We'll lift our way back and into down dog. See if you can feel that upper shoulder shelf as you get back into this. And then let's walk our way forward and into fold. So finding your way all the way to the front of the mat, feeling in to that fold space. Inhale, take a nice big half lift. And then exhale all the way, settling back into your fold, and try to feel those shoulders relax into that settling. And let's drift our awareness to our sacrum. And we're going to roll ourselves up vertebrae by vertebrae, coming into this top space, establishing mountain. And let's bring our hands together. Ah, that heart center. Feel the tops of the shoulders relax down, but not collapse forward. So that relaxation into some width, and see if you can get into that lateral connective tissue between the torso and the neck. So as we relax, can we feel softening there? And then let's anchor across the shoulders as we lift our chin towards the ceiling once again, and try to get into that anterior neck musculature. Head comes back to neutral. And now really feel the head settle at the top of the shape. So we're looking for that place where the head feels weightless. If the chin is tilted forward, we're going to feel pull on the back of the neck. If the chin is tilted up at all, we're going to feel kind of off balance. So we're looking to find the place where our head feels weightless. And we're going to use that as our guide to get back into chair. So head is staying in this position where it feels weightless as we go back. And that might mean that our chair is pretty significantly shorter or taller, depending on how you want to judge your chair. Different, less depth to the seat, we'll say, than what we might normally be. But really think about head staying middle of the place. And then note if you're getting sensations in the back that you don't normally get in chair. And see if by relaxing and broadening into the shoulders, we can take some of those sensations away. And then we'll rise back up, sweep the arms up and overhead, and exhale through forward fold. Let your back go. Let that musculature, especially in those places that were speaking to you in chair, really relax into the fold. And then let's plant our hands and we'll walk back into down dog. And one more time, or another time might be a better way to say that. Let's extend our head away from the tailbone. So the tailbone becomes this energetic anchor, right? Held in space. And then without letting the weight shift forward, the head starts to the top of the head. So no chin lift, the top of the head starts to reach out. And we want to feel the whole posterior chain come under a little bit of extra tension from that. And then we'll shift forward to plank and slowly lower ourselves down to our belly. And let's keep our hands right underneath the shoulders here. Flex the quads, kneecaps lift. Squeeze those elbows in and anchor the forehead to your mat. And then just think about bringing the elbows towards the rib cage. That's all we're worried about here is elbows towards the rib cage. So we have the lower half of the body set up for stability with the quad flex. We are using the upper half of the body, or we're creating neutrality in the upper half of the body, maybe using glute flex. And then the elbows are squeezing in, and we're breathing. And relax. Slide your hands underneath your forehead for a little crocodile pose. So let's just breathe here for a moment. Pay attention to the balance or imbalance between the anterior and the posterior chains. So we started off class with this big anterior attack is the wrong word, certainly mobilization. There we go. So this big anterior mobilization, right? And it was all upper torso throat related. But that has all these downstream implications. And we don't spend a lot of time opening the anterior stream. So as you're settling here, note how the two sides of the body are responding to this space you've created at the throat. And we're going to give ourselves about 60 more seconds just to feel into that. So there's this young man who from a very early age has felt displaced in society and distanced from people around him, including his family, including his friends. And he's gone through university and he's graduated and he's set out on his own. He created this poultry business for a while and it made money, but it didn't feel like it was the right thing for him. And so he's left that world and he's just kind of lost in what he's going to do next. When you're ready, we're going to slide our hands back underneath our shoulders. We'll press ourselves up to hands and knees tabletop. And from hands and knees tabletop, let's slide our left foot forward so that we end up in this grounded lunge. And from our grounded lunge, let's sweep ourselves up into grounded crescent and then drop our hands to heart center. And then take your right tricep and place it on your left thigh. So hands are staying roughly at heart center. To do that, we have to twist. And if this twist doesn't feel good with the tricep, you can go with the forearm, right? So we can shorten that twist requirement. And then we're just going to start to seek the height of that left elbow as we start to maybe gaze towards the ceiling. Really thinking about hands staying pressurized together or energized together, but the left elbow reaching as we twist. And again, this can be done from the forearm as well. Same thing. Eventually, we'll come back to neutral. Hands will drop to the mat and we'll curl our right toes underneath us. So now we have some pressure between the toes and we have the tripod of the hands helping out on that left foot. And we're just going to press ourselves up to traditional lunge and then sweep ourselves up to traditional crescent and then drop our hands heart center. Think about the anterior posterior neutrality like usual, and then we'll follow this with a nice little twist over to the left. As you do so, you want to make sure that that back foot is staying pointing straight up and that this left thigh is not falling out at all, but we're really still balanced on that medial line. Spinning back to neutral, sweeping the arms to fully express the shape, loading the hands down to the mat, and just slide back into that left hamstring here. Just feeling space on that posterior chain. And then we'll bend that left knee and step back into down dog. Feel your asymmetry of space here. Then let's come down to hands and knees. Lift the tops of the feet and sink back into child's pose. Once again, anterior posterior awareness, and now we have some of that bilateral awareness, right? How does the left and right side feel in comparison to one another? How does the front and back side of the body feel in comparison to one another? And that's a long sequence we did right there with a lot of mobilization. So really think about finding your way back to a neutrally aligned spine as you breathe here in this little recharge shape. And let's just give ourselves about 15 more seconds here. And when you're ready, hands reach out in front of us. If they're not already there, we'll inhale, pull ourselves forward to hands and knees, tabletop. From hands and knees, tabletop, let's slide the right foot forward, grounded lunge. Sweep yourself up to grounded crescent, and then drop the hands to heart center. Left tricep is going to find the right thigh. Remember, this can be the forearm as well, so it doesn't have to be the full twist if that doesn't feel appropriate for you. And then we're going to reach with that right elbow as we maybe gaze up towards the ceiling. Thinking about the right elbow as the guide, and it can be the same thing from the forearm. Right elbow can guide us into this twist. And then we'll release back to neutral, hands come to the mat. Left toes curl underneath us. And we'll lift ourselves up to traditional lunge. From traditional lunge, so you have the hands there to help stabilize, we'll sweep ourselves up into traditional crescent, and then hands come together at heart center, and we'll twist over towards that right shoulder. So really thinking about staying with that medial line as we rotate, and just feeling this big trunk mobility or mobilization. And eventually, we're going to come back to neutral, sweep the arms, float the hands down to the mat, and we'll slide back into that right hamstring so that we capture the posterior chain On side 2. That right hamstring space really kind of being the center focus. Eventually, we'll bend the right knee, step the right foot back into down dog. You have a lot of room here. Anchor the hips, anchor the hips. Feel that hip anchor, extend the top of the head. So you push the top of the head away and get the anterior and posterior chains to bring more tension into the line. And then let's come down to hands and knees and we'll sink back and into child's pose. And so one day this young man, just feeling lost, not knowing what to do with himself, he goes up this hill. He's on his motorcycle. And there's this big kind of like sub mountain, mini mountain, where all of the local youth hang out. They go all the way to the top and they just kind of sit up there and talk to one another, do things that young people do. And he gets halfway up and he doesn't really feel like going and being with people. So he just pulls off the side of the road. He gets off his motorcycle and he sits down on this big flat rock. And he's looking around and the sun's up and it's overhead. It's probably like 11:30 a.m. and all the birds are chirping. And he's just surrounded by nature. And he closes his eyes for what feels like 10, 15 seconds. But when he opens his eyes again, it's the middle of the night. Last full breath here. Big full inhale that brings that energy into the lung space. And then deep releasing exhale where you feel the energy dissipate out of you, out of your lungs, and out of the physicality of the musculature. And then we'll slide our hands in front of us and pull ourselves forward to hands and knees, tabletop, when it feels appropriate for you. Let's curl our toes, lift our seat, and find our way back into down dog. And we'll walk our way forward to the front of the mat. Inhale into half lift. And exhale back into fold. Yeah, beautiful, Annie. Really nice. Really letting yourself go into this fold, feeling your body relax into the space of this fold. And then let's drift our awareness to our sacrum and we'll roll ourselves up vertebrae by vertebrae. Coming all the way to the top space, finding our way into mountain. Set your head where it feels weightless. And let's sink our way back in a chair. So again, head is kind of the dictator of the depth here. And then we'll rise back up. And as you come back up, you want to establish the balance of the shape once again. So think about the head finding its mid space. Bring your hands to heart center if they're no longer there. Left foot straight back and into lunge. Landing in the lunge where our head still feels weightless and in the middle of the shape. Ground the left heel. And let's blossom open into warrior 2. And then from this warrior 2, let's put the weight in the heel of the right foot and just take the toes of the right foot and turn them open like 10 to 15 degrees so that we open up this medial line of that front leg just a little bit more. So see if I can get of course I can't do that. How about this? We just go to about right here. No more than that for sure. And less than that is perfect. And we just feel a little bit more openness there. And then we're going to draw back into that hamstring just to establish the stability here and drop our hands to our hips. And then come right back into that warrior two leg alignment. Beautiful. Blossom back out into the shape. And then left heel spins up. Actually, right foot re-straightens. So if we find that straight right foot, then the left heel spins up, or in crescent. We'll float the hands down to the mat and then draw your left foot forward to mirror the right. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Breathe, settle, and land in your fold. Drift your awareness to your sacrum. Let's roll ourselves up vertebrae by vertebrae, nice and slow, just finding our way into this top space eventually. Bringing our hands together at heart center. Letting the head find that place of stillness, weightlessness, and then sinking back and into this version of chair, right? Which we stay neutral. We stay neutral in the anterior posterior, but we may not drop so far that our head comes forward. And then we'll rise back up. Right leg's gonna slide straight back and into lunge. Establish that space, ground your right heel, blossom open into full version of warrior two. From that full version, just put the weight in the heel and subtly open that front foot. Think about that strong line down the middle of the shape. So we have this extra opening request, but we're locked in this middle line. And eventually we're going to bring the hands to the hips. Settle into that space. And then we'll blossom back out into two. Fix the alignment of the front foot. Spin the right heel up and into crescent. Float the hands down to the mat. And slide that right foot forward and into fold. And feel the back and feel the hips and feel the length available to you in that fold. Then we'll plant our hands and we'll walk ourselves back into plank. Reestablish the stability of plank, or the stability of the torso now within plank, and then lower yourself down to your belly. And as we come down to our belly, let's bring our hands, let's keep the hands where they are, right? So roughly underneath the shoulders, flex the quads, tuck the toe mounds underneath you so that now the legs lift up to ankle height. And then pull with your fingertips towards your elbow pits and feel your head reach out towards the front of the mat. And then lift the head maybe a half inch, no more than a half inch. Quarter inch can work. If you're feeling any compression of the skin on the back of the neck, the head lifted too far. Think about elongating the neck and keeping the skin on the back of the neck nice and smooth. And we're going to hold this for 15 more seconds. And when you're ready, when it feels right, we'll relax, slide our hands underneath our forehead for a little crocodile pose. And we'll just take a couple of rounds of breath here. And so he opens his eyes. Everything's dark. It's the middle of the night. He has no idea what's happened. He's scared. He's confused. He gets back on his motorcycle. He drives home and he's trying to put all the pieces together of what happened. And over the course of the next few weeks, similar things happen. He closes his eyes for what feels like no time at all, and these huge swaths of time disappear. And he starts noticing changes in his energy and his being and his ability to be relaxed within stressful situations. And eventually he figures out, maybe by luck, maybe by happenstance, maybe by a series of fortunate events, he's found his way into this deeply profound meditation. And he decides at that moment that in the next 5 years, he is going to teach the world how to meditate. He is going to enlighten the humans on the planet. He is going to end wars, bring world peace. He's going to build a conscious humanity that is going to fix problems of hunger and need and want and truly change the world. When you're ready, let's slide our hands underneath our shoulders and let's press ourselves up to hands and knees tabletop. From hands and knees tabletop, curl your toes, lift your seat, find your way back into down dog. Reach and extend back into that down dog space. Push the tailbone back, then extend the head out and get that elongation of our spine. And let's walk our way forward to the front of the mat. Inhale to half lift. Think about the strength required to hold this half lift and the length of the musculature as you're creating this half lift. And then transition that length back into the depth of your fold as you release here. Then we will sweep ourselves up and release our hands to heart center. Let's take our right foot and bring it like just in front of the left foot. So not stacked, but just in front of the left foot's toes so that we have a staggered step. And from here, we're going to take that same half fold that we just did, but our hands are going to be at heart center. So we're just going to that established elongated back position, but now we don't have the dual hamstring. We've broken up the lateral responsibility or the posterior chain responsibility into this bilateral need. And then pull yourself up, rebalance your feet, and then sweep your arms up and overhead and exhale through forward fold. And we'll inhale to half lift. Exhale back to fold. And sweep yourself back to mountain. The right foot's going to slide backward, the left foot's going to slide forward, whichever feels appropriate, depending on your mat spacing, so that we have the opposite side in front now. Remember, we're not tight roped, we are just staggered. And once you feel a good amount of stability here, hands at heart center, we'll take that half fold once again and really think about the necessity of that front leg. It is a front leg responsibility here, and we're elongating the back, just like we did when we had the dual legs. And then we'll slowly sweep ourselves back up. Re-establish our neutral foot positioning, sweep the arms up and overhead, and exhale through forward fold. Let that mid back go, especially. So we kind of get back into that shelf that we approached very early on in class, right? That subscapula shelf. And inhale to half lift. Beautiful. Exhale back into fold. Nice, Annie. And just releasing and settling back into our fold space. Let's drift our awareness to our sacrum, and we're going to sweep ourselves up and bring our hands together at heart center. Nice work. Okay, let's slide our left foot all the way back into lunge. Traditional alignment. And let's take our left hand to our left hip and our right forearm to our right thigh for side angle. So a modified side angle here. And I want you to feel like you have space and also kind of be responsible to the hamstring that we just fatigued. If it's within your practice, turn the right toes out that 5 to 15%, like we did earlier in Warrior 2. It makes this shape significantly harder, even though we have kind of shortened up the depth. And then we'll bring the foot back to neutral, draw ourselves up into Warrior 2, land in that full depth you've created, and then spin the left heel up. Fine crescent. And hands drop to heart center. We'll use that to return to the front of the mat. Oh, such big adjustments tonight. When you're right, we're going to slide that right foot back. We land, we stabilize, right hand to the right hip, left forearm to the thigh, and we ground the back heel for our side angle. Then, only if it's within your practice, we take that left toe mound and we rotate that open to access a little bit more hamstring, a little bit more medial line, a little bit more necessity of balance. And we still find our ability to breathe. Eventually, left foot comes back. We draw ourselves open to Warrior 2. Settle all the way into the shape. Right heel spins up. We're in crescent. Hands drop to heart center as we return to the front of the mat. Feel the anterior posterior kind of balance or counterbalance here. And think about maybe bringing more glute engagement than you'd normally think you'd need here, because we've done such a good job fatiguing that mid-body space. And then let's drop our hands to our hips one more time. And we're going to slow roll this forward fold to half fold where we're going to pause. So nice and slow. See if this is a better. Really thinking about neutral leg alignment, getting to that halfway point, and feeling the back respond. And then let yourself completely go into the fold. Eventually the hands can release, can relax, can encourage the depth. And we want to feel that depth here. And then let's slowly, gently, delicately bring our seat down towards our heels, towards Malasana. And then we'll extend our legs out in front of us. Good tall version of staff before we fold into this little seated, awaiting seated forward fold. And this fold may feel like the easiest seated forward fold you've done in a while, right? We did a lot of things to prep ourselves for a seated forward fold tonight. Make sure you are allowing yourself the ability to relax and to transcend limitations, especially hamstring limitations, to find your way all the way into the depth you've created for this forward fold. And we'll give ourselves about 30 more seconds here. Eventually, we'll walk ourselves back up into seat, staff, and work our way onto our backs, where we land and receive the neutrality from our mat and appreciate all the work we've done here tonight. So far, anyway. And so this young man now with this plan of changing the world through spreading consciousness gets on his motorcycle and he starts traveling around the entire continent or the entire country of India. And he is going essentially home to home and building connections where he can utilize people's homes to offer this teaching of this practice of meditation. And at first, it's pretty hard to get anyone to come. And he starts to get one or two people. And he's putting on thousands and thousands of miles on his motorcycle as he travels around the country. But he's developing these connections in these homes where he can teach this practice. And one or two people becomes 4 or 5 people. And because the practice is so profound, because the practice is impacting people, 4 or 5 people pretty quickly becomes 10 to 15 people. And now teaching in homes is limiting. There's not enough space. Soon it's 20 to 25 people, and it's impossible to get as many people as desire to learn from him into these homes. And so he starts raising funding. And with that funding, he purchases land and he builds this temple. And now people can come to him to get this teaching. And he starts teaching now 100, 200 people at a time. When you're ready, let's inhale and bring our knees into a bent position. Kneecaps point towards the ceiling space. Arms can most ideally find their way to cactus, but they could also land behind your head here. And then we're going to start to sway the knees side to side, seeking and searching for the capacity to rotate, the capacity for the upper and lower half of the body to operate as one team. And as we're moving, as we're exploring here, and we're doing so with all of this length we've created, really deeply pay attention to 2 things. 1, the reception and release of energy with the breath. And 2, the sticky and rigid points that are still within us around this trunk space, around our hips, around our lumbar, And if you find a space, pause there, maybe briefly just give some rocking sensation into that spot and then resume your movement. Don't think that this just needs to be this constant window wiping motion. If there's spots that need attention, give them attention. Eventually, when it feels appropriate for you, let's let both knees fall over towards the right and let's let them settle there. So now he's teaching 100, 200 people a time this practice, and people are constantly approaching him and telling him how his teaching has impacted their lives and how it's dramatically improved their experience. And he starts to travel the world, and he's doing these pop-ins to different countries, and he'll teach 1,000, 2,000 people in a country at once, and then he'll move on. And eventually he starts opening up centers in other countries. And the centers start to build bigger and bigger capacity. So now he can do 5, 10,000 people at once. And eventually, even that's not enough. He starts to teach just through online practices. So he can do hundreds of thousands of people at once. And his impact starts to gain this worldwide recognition. And he has a facility in the United States which garners the attention of the news media here. And one of the big networks has him come in and sit down for this hour-long expose on him. And he sits down and he is asked questions to share his story. And so he shares the story from being this young, kind of detached boy. When you're right, when you're ready, let's bring our knees back to neutral. And then we'll exhale and let the knees fall over to the second side. And growing up and going to university and starting the poultry business and it not really connecting and him sitting on this rock and him losing this time and making this decision that he was going to, in 5 years, change the entirety of the planet. And driving around India on this motorcycle and teaching 1 or 2 people at a time, and then 5 or 10, and then 10 or 20, and then 100 or 200, and then 1,000 or 2,000, and 5,000 or 10,000. And now hundreds of thousands at a single setting. And this newscaster, she's just blown away by everything that he's done. And she's mesmerized by every word that he shares. Last 30 seconds here on this second side. And when you're ready, we'll bring our knees back to neutral. As we do so, we'll drift our awareness within and ask ourselves if there's anything we might want, need, desire, would benefit from before Shavasana. And if there is, let's offer that to ourselves. And if you feel like you have everything you need, if you feel like you're completely ready for some stillness, then let's drift into that opportunity for stillness this evening. And let's settle in to a shape that feels supportive. So as the interview is wrapping up, the lights are getting taken down, the microphones are getting taken off. The interviewer looks at this guru and she says, I've interviewed a lot of people, and your story is one of the most incredible success stories that I've ever encountered. And you should be absolutely amazed and proud of what you've done. And he starts laughing and he says, didn't you hear what I said? And she says, I heard every word of it. Absolutely. And it's incredible. You're an amazing success. Well, you must have missed the part where I said in 5 years, I wanted to change the world. I wanted to enlighten humanity. I wanted to create world peace. That was 25 years ago now. I'm one of the biggest failures that's ever existed. We'll start to bring some movement into our fingers and our toes. Into our wrists and our ankles. To our elbows and our knees. Shoulders and hips. Neck, head, jaw, eyes, tongue. The entirety of the body starts to move. And we'll utilize that movement to transition from the shapes we are in back into a seat. From the seated space, spine gets tall, breath gets fluid, eyes close. And feel the energy as you draw your inhale breath and the dissipation of that energy as you exhale. And we'll inhale our hands together, our heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, can you allow yourself to stop wasting your time wondering about things you know you can do? And start doing the things that you feel are impossible. And see how that changes your experience. Thank you so much for being a part of this evening's practice and for being you. Namaste. Happy Monday, guys. Appreciate the heck out of you being here. Have a beautiful week. I'll be back on Sunday to recharge, and we'll do this movement again next Monday. Love the heck out of you. Mwah.